Yeah, that sounds good. Excellent. Okay. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Here we go. All right. So, what we've been doing is the five paths. Let me get to that. Tibetan Buddhism is especially helpful. I mean, if there's a practice that originates in Buddha's enlightenment, so to speak, was developed thereafter, and the lineages remain pure, it can take you to Buddhahood. So Buddhism has this kind of happy history of a basically non-sectarian kind of basis. Instead of starting from a place of sectarianism, it starts with non-sectarianism, as although that concept is a little weak for trying to explain it. What's really wonderful about the Tibetans is that the way that the Dharma came to them was conscious. I mean, Tibetan emperors sent their best and brightest with royal support over the Himalaya to India to learn, transmit, and bring back and transmit the full range of Buddhism as it existed in India 1,500 years after Buddha passed away. So this happens to be like the peak of Buddhist cultural development in India. And it was transformative for India first and then later for Tibet. Certainly for India, because we know, we have indications of what India was like at the time of the Buddha, just from the various things that were written down. And then we also know when the India itself had a Buddhist king, Ashoka. This is like 200 and 250 years after the Buddha passed away. So we have many. He had contact with Alexander's empire, for instance, Greeks. And so we have Greek accounts of Buddhist monks. And actually, we know that there were Buddhist monks in the city that Alexander founded as his capital, Alexandria, in northern India. So we knew that there were this great library there, the greatest library in the ancient world, which was unfortunately destroyed. But nonetheless, we know that there were Buddhist monks there and Buddhist texts there. So this kind of remarkable thing. But we have a good idea of the state of India, rather, because there were all sorts of teachings at the time of Ashoka about let's not be doing animal sacrifices, for instance. And then we have the account of this Chinese monk who pilgrimaged. I mean, he spent 10 years, I think, traveling. He was one of the last people to see Nalanda monastery in northern India. And so he was in India like in the 200s, 300s, somewhere in there. And at that time, he reported that all of India was vegetarian. So we have this account for the progress, so to speak, cultural progress. And then 1,500 years after Buddha, the Tibetans arrive and transmitted the full range. So the significance of that is basically just different strokes for different folks. If you can find a Buddhist practice anywhere in the Buddhist world, you can find it or its near equivalent in what's called Tibetan Buddhism, but not necessarily the other way around. Especially the tantric teachings don't exist in some traditions, or exist in a more limited way in some. For instance, Shingon in Japan means true word. It's referring to mantra. You might call the indigenous, not really indigenous, but the tantric Buddhism that directly transmitted from India to China and then later to Japan. Shingon is the survivor of that, but the rest of it in China died out. Who knows why? It might be cultural reasons, because the Chinese are a little bit more, I don't know what to say, but they're, I think some of the tantric imagery just doesn't work for a lot of Chinese people. It's too garish, it's too loud, so to speak. So Chinese tantric Buddhism died out but survived in Japan, and then only later people in China who had a karma, a connection, an interest in tantric Buddhism got it through Mongolian and then Tibetan lamas because the Mongols conquered China. Um, so it came in that way. So the interesting thing is that you have, well, like they say, 84,000 different heaps of teachings, tremendous variety and diversity. And this is a great thing. The Tibetan experience is helpful because it's so comprehensive and systematic. Sometimes if you're in one tradition, maybe it works a little bit for you, but then you sort of come to a blockage and your teacher may not. I mean, any realized teacher can deal with you in many different ways, but it can be that the actual sort of methods aren't as available. So one of the examples of this comprehensiveness is how the Tibetans have laid out a map of, and it comes from India. The Tibetans didn't originate this, but this map of the whole path going from a state of ignorance to omniscience, to Buddhahood. And it's rather remarkable, but it's also very helpful because, in a way, you have guidance. I once, absolutely, the first Tibetan Lama I ever met, I didn't know who he was. I was not practicing Tibetan Buddhism. I found out 25 years later who he was. And he was the tutor to the current Karmapa. So he's one of the highest Kempo in the Karma Kagyu school. And I have to admit, so full of myself. I'd done a little bit of Zen Buddhism, and I was sort of pushed into an interview with him by a student of the Karmapa who we just happened to be traveling with. And I said, what's the deal with all these teachings? All these books, all this stuff. Isn't this just conceptual knowledge? Doesn't that just create an obstacle and get in the way for our own realization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And he just simply said, well, the teachings, all the teachings, the books, everything are just guideposts. So if you go off the path, it's a guidepost that you can say, am I off the path? Am I not off the path? What is this that I'm doing? You can consult with other people. You consult with the books. You look deeply into your own mind. So they're just helpful. And this is the fundamental sane attitude about the entire Buddhist world. It's like the Buddha said, my teachings are like a finger pointing at the moon. Don't make the mistake of thinking that the finger is the moon. So it's all provisional. And it's like the tools that we need in order to get the result that we're after, but it's not the result itself. So there's no need to fight over the tool or to worship the tool, so to speak. So one of these different kind of schemes, you might say, or schemata that Tibet took from India and then used to sort of lay out conceptually the path in a helpful way are the 5 paths that lead to Buddhahood. We've been going over just to survey them very briefly, just to name them. First is the path of accumulation, and the second is the path of joining, sometimes called the path of engaging, the path of joining, and then the path of insight, then the path of cultivation or meditation, and then finally the path of no more learning. So what we've done these past 3 weeks, we've gone for the first 2 paths. The first path, again, the path of accumulation, what's going on there? Well, the path of accumulation is where we start to look at the mind and we start to analyze our situation. So for instance, in the United States and probably international now, there are what are called Vipassana centers. The main practice there, they stem from modern revivification of Buddhism in Burma and Southeast Asia, and very same teachings that Kempo gave here, and the 5 foundations of 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that's where the path of accumulation starts. We're starting to look at what we're doing, and we're starting to engage with the teachings and starting to act in accordance with them, so to speak, and to do this analysis, finding what's real, what works. Basically, it's cause and effect. If we want one result, what do we have to do to get there, so to speak? But interestingly, starts with the four foundations of mindfulness. This is where we examine the body, for instance. And because our great attachment is attachment to our body, it's a wonderful place to start. The Chud retreat that was just done here, that's the one of the powers of Chud, is that you're actually offering your body through this elaborate visualization where you're chopping up your body, melting it as a nectar, spreading it around to the six realms of existence. You're going right to, even if you're just pretending, which in a way we are, still mentally you're going through the process. So in a sense, it's just kind of like learning our ABCs. In the beginning, it's just rote, and we're practicing sounds that, the infant child doesn't really know anything about these things, the meaning of them at all. It's just repeating what mom says. So we look this deep kind of mental dissection of the body, and that with that, you gain a clear understanding of the first noble truth, the truth of dissatisfaction. You're not going to find any ultimate kind of satisfaction in the body. But through this investigation, you've actually gained deeper understanding of that, first conceptual, but then actually experiential, because you're using your mind, the source, to look at all of this. So the body, this leads, we then meditate on feelings. We meditate on the mind. This means the mind stream. And then finally, we meditate on dharmas, meaning not with a capital D, but a small d, all appearances. So there's this deepening, progressive investigation of basically what is this reality that we're in. So that's where the path of accumulation starts. It ends with this kind of confidence, and then at that point we actually set aside and do accumulations of merit. So now with your mind kind of set right, you can do prostrations, you can do mantra, you can do giving, you can do all sorts of things. Everything you're doing then becomes this intent on gaining merit. So you may be just simply giving a grain of rice to a sparrow, but you're doing it with the motivation of liberating this bird throughout all of its future lifetimes. And then from liberating everyone that has contact with this being in its future lifetimes and in this lifetime. So it becomes very vast, the mind. But again, still in a worldly sense, you might say. This is not realization, but this is the accumulation of merit. Now, this merit, I like to think of it as inertia, in the sense of, force, or, a body that's in motion stays in motion. I like to think of merit sometimes as like when you come in the room and you flip on the light switch. That's why the light goes on, because there's merit there waiting to be engaged, you might say. Makes everything effective. So this accumulation of merit is extremely important, and yet is often just sort of overlooked in Western Buddhism. The Asian cultures, having been inculcated in it, kind of get it automatically. I mean, I notice in different Dharma centers that Garchen Rinpoche's lamas have founded, or not just his, but others too, where there's an Asian Sangha. They seem to naturally do much better on the economic side, whether it's Vietnamese, whether it's Tibetan, whether it's Chinese and Taiwanese. They just sort of understand. It's kind of like we do with hospitals. We're not wondering why people, like Thomas Golisano or somebody, gives a tremendous amount of money to a hospital. We don't think, well, why are they doing that? Western Dharma centers can be a little bit different than that. We don't understand that teaching of merit, but that's what's going on here. This first path of accumulation of merit. So that leads to the second path, which is, in summary, the path of engaging, the path of joining, the path of, what does this Geshe call it? The path of preparation. So we've done the accumulation, we have merit. What starts with the path of preparation is the practicing on the nature of the mind, emptiness. So at this point, and when I mentioned like the fact that merit produces, momentum or potentiality, you might say, you're gradually, instead of working with the mind in a kind of frustrating way, a samsaric way, just going around and around in circles, sometimes good, then bad, just scattering. Instead, it's like this process of, the example they use sometimes is the rays of the sun. We have all the rays of the sun coming in, providing benefit, warmth, light, especially warmth. And the practice of accumulation of merit is like creating a lens. And now through that lens, all these different rays of light can be focused, you might say. This is the practice of concentration and focused, giving the rays, same rays of light, but now they're sort of more powerful because they're not scattered. And this is the beginning of the path of engaging, or like he says, preparation. So now we're using this newly found potentiality. I mean, the potentiality has always been there, but now we're actualizing it. And so now with this practice of in the meditations on emptiness, we're looking at things actually exist in kind of an existential way. Every single thing, every single appearance, how does it actually exist? What is its nature? So there's this path then of preparation, using the power that we have. And this is where the path of preparation starts. So this path of preparation progresses, right? And it goes to a place where we develop what are called the 5 powers. These are the 5 powers that are necessary for attaining the experiential understanding of the Aryas, the noble ones. All right, what are those? Well, faith, strong conviction. Now, again, this comes through the meditation on emptiness. And that meditation on emptiness, the nature of things it can be like a formal practice, like, on the text of emptiness and sort of taking them to the end of their understanding and then experientially experiencing, just sort of leaping off from your conceptual knowledge. But it can also be with anything that you're doing. You have this understanding of the fact that nothing exists entirely unto itself, apart from everything else, rather this incredible interdependence. So that kind of understanding is deepening as we go forward with whatever practice we're doing on the path of preparation, the path of engaging. Of course, preparation means preparation for realization. So these 5 powers, faith, the strong conviction in the truth of the law of cause and effect and the 4 noble truths. The second power is armor-like perseverance. Perseverance of well-trained bodhisattvas who have the wish to remain for eons in the 3 lower stages of rebirth, if this would benefit even one sentient being. Third is keeping in mind the characteristics of the 4 noble truths. Fourth power is the combination of shamatha and vipassana, shamatha being the concentration aspect of practice and vipassana being insight into the nature of things as they are, which is first gained in a conceptual way, which is like the foundation for going further into experiential. Again, this is the path of preparation for what? For the next path, which is insight. And then finally, the ability to examine the void nature of the 4 noble truths. So we started out with the Four Noble Truths: the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of there is an end to suffering, and the truth of the path that leads to the end of suffering. So this is where we start. But at the end of the path of preparation, it's called the highest worldly Dharma. And at that point, we're examining the void nature of the Four Noble Truths themselves. This to me is just unique. It's just the incredible freedom of the Dharma. It's not attached even to its own methods. I mean, I don't know, but it's an extremely rare kind of historical experience, because the world is wont to grasp at anything. And especially when you have something that's beneficial, that the nature is to grab to it and actually you kind of ruin it in a way. You can see that sometimes with very worldly kind of wealthy people, rich people or something, or I always pick on Hollywood. They just keep going in that direction sometimes and really fall off the deep end. So here, this is the end of the path of preparation. These 5 powers that I just went through are developed during the path of preparation and are retained thereafter until the attainment of enlightenment. These 5 forces are gained during the, at first, you can develop them when you're meditating, but after meditating, you don't have them. But eventually you have them whether you're meditating or not meditating together. But they bring one to the quick attainment of the next path, which occurs during meditation at the end of the path of preparation, when one feels competent to attain full realization of emptiness. So there's this gathering confidence, you might say. This corresponds with the unshakable kind of faith where you have an understanding of the nature of things. And so on the outer way, when things are screwing up, in another way, nothing wrong is happening ever, because you're losing your attachment to this idea, this worldly idea, which is fundamentally self-grasping, which is fundamentally an alienated point of view, that I am somehow, this I is just like completely apart, unrelated, not touched by. All right, so the path of insight. Let's see what this one calls it. Path of seeing. Yeah. Insight, seeing. The direct experience of non-conceptual wisdom. That is the path of seeing. The definition of this path is the actual understanding of truth, or shunyata, emptiness. Before its attainment, emptiness is confused with one's impression or image of it. The difference is like that between recalling the visage of a friend and actually seeing him or her. From the Guru's teaching on emptiness, one forms an impression of it which is mistaken for emptiness itself. This is abandoned when emptiness is experienced directly. According to the Prasangikas, now, different philosophical views in Buddhism, most of Tibetan Buddhism, and certainly us here, might be called Prasangika Madhyamikas. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but it's the great teaching of Nagarjuna. All right, according to the Prasangikas, which this author regards as the highest philosophical level, all states of consciousnesses of ordinary beings, including their sensory consciousness, are deceptive. And this is due to their confusing truth with the conception of it. As such a subtle point, but so important, and teaches us so much. We're running around just dealing with our concepts. And Buddhism does not reject the concepts, but does not let them rule the roost, so to speak. There's something more fundamental. Concepts are like waves on the consciousness of the mind, waves on the depths of the mind. The Aryas, or those who have attained the path of insight, have two states of consciousness. They have non-deceptive understanding of emptiness, but they have deceptive consciousness of the five senses, as well as the instinctive afflictions. Attaining the path of insight involves seeing the bare truth for the first time. And it is on this path that all intellectually formed kleshas, which arise from invalid reasoning, are eliminated. For example, when one sees a table, one automatically thinks that it exists independently. This tendency is an inborn klesha, inborn affliction. We can't help it, and we don't have to pretend that we're otherwise. I see that chair. It appears to me as if it's independently existing and apart from everything else. Believing by relying on reasons that it exists as such is an intellectually formed affliction. So this is what we do. We come up with reasons that support our delusion. So the whole thing becomes very tight, knot. Upon attainment of the path of insight, one is freed forever from throwing karma, which is caused by self-grasping. After this, I'll say something on that. After this, there is no chance of rebirth in any of the three lower realms. Since the force of throwing karma has been destroyed, one has control over one's future rebirth. So throwing karma is the force. It is our propensity to give the absolute reality, and therefore it gives the power of the mind, you might say, the power to throw the mind into a new existence. It's said for throwing karma, there have to be different qualities. For like a negative karma, for instance, if your mind was completely pure, nothing else, and all there was just one incident, what would be the cause and effect, the effect of that incident? Well, let's say killing. First, you have to have to have the heaviest throwing karma, you have to have a specific individual in mind. Like you see an ant. So rather than just driving down the road and, we're killing all sorts of bugs with our car mindlessly, not that. For throwing karma, you have to have specificity. There's an ant. Then you have to have the intention to kill the ant, not accidentally, but on purpose. And then you actually have to do the deed. But further, you have to take joy in it. That's full throwing karma. So if our mind was completely pure, no karma there at all, and you did that with those four powers, that would throw you into hellish existence. Now, in our actual existence, we are so complex because we have so many karmic threads sort of in our mind and influences that everything is all jumbled together, and one thing affects another. So it doesn't necessarily result in that immediacy, for instance. It's said, though, part of the bodhisattva path is that your karma, the fruition comes more quickly. And of course, this works for good things too. Seeing an animal, a worm that you want to save, forming the thought, I'm going to save this worm. Picking it up out of the street, putting it on some dirt, feeling joy after that. That's throwing karma that throws you to a higher realm. So this is what we're learning especially the path of accumulation. All right, so it gives you control over one's future rebirth instead of just mindlessly being thrown around by these almost evolutionary kind of forces, these chthonic forces, you might say, really dark forces that, well, it's like, everyone seems nice and peaceful and civilized, but then the Titanic's going down and suddenly there's panic, that kind of force that's latent in the mind. During this path, the path of insight, the path of seeing, the 7 causes of enlightenment are attained. The Tibetan term for enlightenment, Jangchub, is a composite of two terms, meaning freedom from both kinds of kleshas. The kleshas would be the intellectual kleshas and then the emotional kleshas. So, meaning freedom from both kinds of kleshas means that, and it also means the ability to encompass all that is to be known within one's wisdom. These 7 characteristics that are exclusive attainment of Aryas are as follows. So, one who has fully realized the level of this path of seeing, this path of insight, has 7 characteristics. Memory is a pure cause of enlightenment. So this is the non-samsaric form of pure memory. One who attains it never forgets further goals or virtuous conduct. I mean, it's become so far developed into you that it's just there. It's like a great basketball player going to dunk the basketball. He's done it 10,000 times. He's not thinking about it anymore. It's just automatic flows. Like they said, the bodhisattva, it's like grabbing your pillow that's gotten away from you in the midst of sleep. You don't even wake up. You just grab the pillow and pull it over. It's completely natural. Discriminating wisdom and direct, fresh understanding of non-self existence. Third is pure, enthusiastic perseverance. This perseverance is more intense than that of the earlier paths. And of course, perseverance in Buddhism has the root syllable for joy in it too. This is not like gritting our teeth and doing what we're supposed to be doing. Fourth, a pure state of gladness. This is both a mental and physical happiness which one never experiences until attainment of this path. The word pure, when applied to these terms, means non-samsaric. That which is samsaric is stained by self-grasping or by the instincts of ignorance. So even when we get rid of our self-grasping, there's still the kind of instincts, they say, of ignorance. It's like the example they give, it's like a wooden box, and there's been a cloth handkerchief that's been soaked in perfume that's been in that box for a very long time. We remove the cloth itself. These are removing the self-grasping, but what remains is the smell of that perfume. And those are the mental habits, the residue, you might say, of our emotionality. All right. The instincts of ignorance. For example, if one goes to a magic show and is taken in by the illusions, one's reaction is samsaric. So even though you know that there's a magic show going on, that it's not real, still, you're moved. And those are the instincts of ignorance. Fifth quality, characteristic of the attainment of a noble one, pure ecstasy. This is more intense than the ecstasy that results from the attainment of shamatha. So again, shamatha is the unbroken concentration on an object of meditation. And what comes with that is peace. So ordinarily, our mind is like the surface of a pond that's completely broken by ripples. And so the light of the moon we see it in a fractured way. The moon has never been other than what it is, whole and complete. But yet we experience it in this fractured, faceted way. And so with shamatha, what are we doing? We're calming through this simple practice of just mindfulness and repeat it again and again and again and again. The mind becomes calm, which means that those waves subsist, and there we see more clearly the image of the moon. We're still seeing the image of the moon. It's not realization. We're not experiencing the thing itself, but still big improvement. And what comes with that is ecstasy. I mean, in other words, a lot of the agitation that comes from from experiencing truth in an agitated way, naturally, this is, like the Buddha said, my path is beautiful in the beginning, is beautiful in the middle, is beautiful in the end. Sixth quality is samadhi. He doesn't say anything about that, but samadhi, sama, means even, and di is wisdom. So samadhi is an effortlessness, although you get there by effort. It's effortless quality of the mind, remaining without distraction. All right, seventh quality, a pure state of equanimity. During this state, one has attained relative freedom from obstacles. One of the signs of having attained this path is that one no longer experiences physical suffering. There is then no difficulty in giving away one's body or cutting off one's limbs if this would benefit other sentient beings. Freedom from the following five states of fear is also attained. So this is still part of the seventh characteristics, this pure state of equanimity, these five. Fear of not obtaining food and clothing. This comes naturally. These come naturally without effort. Fear of expressing thoughts to large groups of people. One receives direct teachings from the Buddhas and is able to establish close communication with other people. Fear of death. One is able to choose one's own time of death, for this is no longer governed by the force of karma or the kleshas. Fear of birth in the three lower states. One has great confidence in the fact that all one's seeds for low birth have been destroyed. And then fifth, fear of teaching to the very learned. One does so with complete relaxation, confidence, and assurance of one's understanding of emptiness. On the path of insight, 110 qualities are attained. They include the ability to pass through concrete objects, to see 100 Buddhas at one time and receive teachings from them, non-samsaric clairvoyance, and the ability to manifest oneself in 100 forms at once in order to help others. So clearly, this is the path of insight, the path of seeing, but obviously a very deep realization. Now, I should say that, practice as one experiences it doesn't necessarily flow in these kind of nice packaged, bundles and ideas. In other words, one can have insights in the midst of this. One can be in the path of accumulation and actually have a valid insight, which can be called realization, but it's not the realization that they're talking about here on the path of realization, the path of seeing, the path of insight. This is when one's realization is so deep, you might say, or so comprehensive and pervasive that it's affecting everything that you're doing. Next time we'll get into the path of meditation, which is the progressive deepening, you might say, or spreading of this throughout the mind. And so in one's behavior, it becomes more and more profound, pure, whatever you want to say about it. But the path of insight is the beginning of the 10 bhumis. So you hear Khenpo talking a lot about the 10 bhumis, the 10 levels of profound realization. It'll get into that. Most of them are in the path of meditation, but we're talking here about the first bhumi. We once had, when His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche first came to Rochester, one of our members asked him, how will I know if I've attained the first bhumi? And he said, ceaseless joy. So these are good guideposts. They're really good guideposts, though, because one, they give you confidence that there's some path happening, that there's some progress, because one can feel turned up and down, especially at a retreat, man. You just feel like, what the hell am I doing here? So knowing this conceptually is helpful. You realize somebody thought this up, and you can test, is this valid or not? But at the same time, it gives you things to see. It's not that we're looking for them, but you can have experience, and you put it in a context. It builds confidence and faith. So I think these are extremely helpful. You're going to California, you want to have a map. Map gives you confidence to go. It enhances the trip. It makes it more effective. You get there faster. You get there with less disasters. That's what this is. This is a map of this vast internal path. Okay. Enough from me tonight. Thank you. We got started a little late. Any questions? Anything people want to talk about at all? Next time, we're going to do the path of meditation, which is getting more and more profound. where you slowly eliminate the emotional afflictions, and then as a Mahasattva, a great being, working on the subtle, the remnants sort of ignorance. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, we got a mic for you for our Zoomers. There it is.
When you meditate, you said that there's an ecstasy in that sense of emptiness. Can you explore that?
Uh-huh. We have so many inherent and habitual fears, anxieties, uncertainties. All of these are kind of uh, um, preventing us from experiencing the nature of our mind itself. And when those are gone, even in a moment, we experience bliss. The tantric path, for instance, is one of the reasons it's powerful, is that it unlocks the inherent blissful nature of our mind. And instead of just trying to stay away from non-virtue and the negative things, suddenly you have this ability to embrace one's own inherent powerful feelings of bliss. So these are extremely skillful methods and helpful, because it's like you're finding, you know, tremendous energy to do what you want to do. The danger is our self-grasping. And so that's why there are all these protections on the tantric path of samayas, commitments, have to have empowerment, have to have the instructions that are not given in the text by a realized master or just a master in the tradition. All sorts of protections to protect us from ourselves, from our ego grasping, because it's very easy. I mean, we can see this in a limited way right now, in a very samsaric way. When things are going bad, people are kind of thrown into the Dharma because they're looking for relief. That's really wise. But when things are going well, it's very easy just to ride along with it. we don't have, it's said that in the God realms, for instance, that's the fault of the God realms, is that it's just so wonderful. No one is motivated to do anything. And then eventually your karma runs out. They actually say that the deepest pain in the samsaric world is that of in the God realms, when their karma runs out, because they've been living for centuries, just everything, just totally wonderful. I mean, for instance, the Gandharvas, for instance, that level, people are communicating by scent or glance. I mean, everything they can have sexual experience by glance. They don't have to get involved with hugging or anything that gross. Uh, so they live these extremely refined existences. But at the end, when their karma is running out, it's said that the way it's described is the garlands of flowers that they're wearing start to rot. Their bodies start to smell. And this is like beyond gross to the other God beings. I mean, it's like they have this extreme isolation. And then it says the moment before they die, they can see where they're going to be reborn. And of course, it's lesser. So this is like incredible suffering. So even in the highest samsaric realms, the suffering is intense, at least at some moments. But when things are going well, we're just not motivated to do anything about it. And it's said that the human realm is really the best to find yourself in, because we have this combination of intelligence, able to analyze, able to work on ourselves, but we also have this inherent kind of impermanent situation and dissatisfaction. So we're motivated. Yeah.
Okay, one follow-up.
Sure.
You said uh, sometimes meditation can be viewed as preparation for recognition.
Yeah.
Recognition of what?
Recognition of the nature of your mind as it is, instead of our conceptions of it, instead of our ideas about it. That's why in some of the deities, for instance, are portrayed as being naked. It's just pure, basic, naked experience. Nothing um, yeah, nothing you can say about it because it's limitless. And you might say that everything is springing up out of that. It's like the depths of the ocean, you might say, instead of the waves. We're always being tossed around by the waves. We're living in the waves. We're very good at describing the different waves, patterns, all of that. But they would not exist except without this incredible depth, the nature of things itself, which is limitless. So that's it. We get intimations of that even in the teachings themselves. People can have inspiration because they can just sense that there's something valid there. Um, and even in our daily lives, you can have um, just a simple, pure experience, even in a sensual way. Um, an example is I lost my thought, but for instance, when you bite into a banana, say, I mean, really, the experience of that is really, people try to give it an explanation, but the explanation is never up to the real experience itself. Um, it's in one of the views of Buddhism, the mind only path. They talk about 8 different levels of consciousness. Um, the uh, let's see, the six consciousnesses. The first 5 are the basic senses: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and then 6th one is mind, the thinking mind. Um, the senses are considered to be pure in a sense that they're direct, immediate experience of something, but they're direct, immediate experience. The 6th level of mind, the thinking mind, is reactive. It's taking the products of those eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and conceptualizing them. And again, nothing wrong with this. It's really useful. But as they say, the thinking mind is a tremendous servant, but it's a terrible master. If that's the only thing going on, it's just self-clinging that it's based on, and it always gets in trouble. And the world is so full of really intelligent, well-meaning people. Even societies latch onto some seemingly brilliant concept. No one can argue against it, and then it all turns sour somehow. Um, so this is represented also in the Tantra. The um, piece of the moon disk that the deity is sitting on represents those 5 um, direct sensual experiences. The sun disk, the really hot one that can be trouble, but very powerful if tamed, is the thinking mind. Um, okay, so sorry, you asked a question how to something, and I gave too much, as I always do. It's all right. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Thank you, Zoomers. We'll do a short dedication.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, we'll do the dedication from Shanti Deva. Uh, as Manjushri walks in the 10 directions to the edge of the sky for the furthering of the prosperity of all beings, let my career be like his. As long as space exists and as long as the world exists, for that long, let my existence be devoted to the sorrows of the world. Whatever the sorrow of the world, may all that ripen in me, and may the world be comforted by all of the glorious bodhisattvas. The only medicine for the world's sorrow, the cause of all happiness and success, may the teachings of the Buddha, accompanied by benefit and honor, endure for a long time. I pay homage to Manjushri by the favor which makes beautiful the thought. I honor the good friend by the favor which he has thus increased. May every last one be free. Svaha. Okay. Thank you all. Path of meditation next time. There we go. Great. All the limbs going to sleep.
Thank you, Frank.
You. How's Angus?
He's a Sherman tank. Take care, you guys, and thank you, Rachel, for the tech stuff.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.